Evening, wherever you happen to be. My name is Tony Leneves. I'm the managing partner for Henley's and Henley and Partners Australia, and welcome to this webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about the Australian program, the Australian National Innovation Visa, and New Zealand's very popular Active Investor Plus program. So I'm very happy to have a colleague of mine, John Milne from Henley and Partners Education, joining us. John's going to give us a bit of background about studying in Australia, studying in New Zealand, some of the benefits and the process. And I've also got my good friend Tim Crawford on the call. Tim is with Forsyth Bar in Auckland, and a little bit later on, Tim is going to be talking to you about the New Zealand program, specifically about the investment requirements for the AIP. Now, I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm just going to share that now. Okay, and I hope you can all see that. So again, welcome to this webinar series on Australia and New Zealand. As with all of these webinar casts, we leave some time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions you might have. So save your questions up for the end. You can type them into the Q&A on your screen, and we'll get to them when we get to the end of the webinar. The webinar is also being recorded. We record all of our Henley and Partners webinars, and we'll make sure that that recording is available to anybody who has registered for the event. And also at the end, we provide our contact details. So if you do want to follow up, you have any questions, you want to talk to us about anything that we've covered tonight, then feel free to reach out to us by email. Okay, so what are we going to cover tonight? A little bit about Henley and Partners. I'll go through that in a moment, and then I'll talk fairly briefly about Australia's National Innovation Visa and New Zealand's Active Investor Plus program. We do have a lot of content to get through, and we want to try and keep it down to an hour. So we'll cover those things. Then I'll hand over to Tim. He can talk to you a little bit more in detail about the New Zealand program and the investment requirements. And then John is going to cover studying in Australia and New Zealand and a little bit about Henley and Partners education services. Okay, so for those of you who are new to our events, Henley and Partners is a citizenship and residence advisory firm, and we're the global leader in citizenship and residence by investment. We were pioneers of the industry, and our footprint now is truly global. We have 60 offices, more than 60 offices around the world, and our staff advise clients on more than 40 investment migration options. And today we're just focusing, as I said, on the Australian program and New Zealand's AIP. And while private clients is the main focus of our business, not the only part of our business, we also have a government advisory arm to our company. And over the past 3 decades, we've advised multiple governments on the design, the setup, and the implementation of some of the world's most successful investment migration programs. Through our government advisory agency, we've helped those governments generate more than $15 billion in foreign direct investment. So this map shows you where our offices are. I said we're truly global. You can see that we are located in all of the major source markets, such as the US, Asia, and Africa, as well as in those major residence and citizenship destinations, North America, Europe, the Caribbean, and the Asia Pacific region. So at Henley and Partners, we really do aim to provide our clients with a complete end-to-end hand-holding service. So what that means is wherever you're located, or whatever residence or citizenship program you're looking at, we have someone on the ground in your location who can ensure that your application has the best chance of success. So I mentioned that we can advise our clients on more than 40 investment migration options, and this slide shows you those leading residence and citizenship programs around the world. And you can see in our area down there in Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, and Nauru, which is a very interesting citizenship program proving to be quite popular. Okay, so Australia's National Innovation Visa. I do quite a few of these webinars, and when I do them, I typically get asked, why do people choose Australia? Why is Australia a popular destination for people around the world? Well, these are some of the reasons. It's one of the world's most highly developed countries. It has the economy is in the top 15 economies around the world, a very high quality of life. These points that are listed here on the slide are the sorts of things that people say to us attract them to Australia. Standard of living, the multicultural society, it's very politically, socially and economically stable. I guess our high quality healthcare and education are really, really important. John's going to talk about Australian education a little bit later, but the education industry in Australia is very large. So we do have a big export industry for our education. There are at any given time, 300,000 to 400,000 international students studying in Australia, attending Australian high schools, colleges and universities. And we also have a universal healthcare system, which is very, very popular. It makes Australia a very highly sought after destination. We tend to have 2 or 3 cities in Australia listed in the world's most 10 livable cities index. That's the Economist index that comes out each year. I'm based in Melbourne. Melbourne often rates in the top 5 cities around the world. Also Sydney, Adelaide, also rate very highly. And then that final point, can't be overstated. Australia has no gift tax, no estate tax, no wealth tax. And for our high net worth clients, that's a really important consideration when they're looking at a second residence or an alternative residence. Now, the National Innovation Visa. What is the National Innovation Visa? It's a talent visa, essentially. We are generally in these webinars talking about investor migration. The Australian program is a little bit different because there is no investment requirement. You don't need to put any investment into Australia to qualify for the NIV, but you do need to be exceptionally talented in your field. And I'll cover what the Australian government is looking for in a moment. The program is quite small, 4,000 places each year available. Australia's migration program is close to 200,000 places a year, 180,000 places a year. So 4,000 is a small part of the program. And to qualify for the program, you really do need to be at the top of your field, whatever that field might be, in an area that's of interest to the Australian government. I said there's no investment requirement. There's also no age limit, but if you are over 55, it is more difficult to qualify for this program simply because 55 is the minimum retirement age in Australia, and the Australian government is, they don't want this program to become a retirement program. It really is designed to attract people who are going to come and contribute to the Australian economy and the Australian community. It is direct to permanent residence. There's no temporary visa involved. If you qualify for this, you get permanent residence from day one. And because of that, it is really an attractive option for applicants who are considering an Australian education. Because once you're an Australian permanent resident, your children are permanent residents, they can attend schools, colleges, universities here like any other Australian. They're not subject to the international student fees and requirements that the international students have to meet. The program is designed to attract emerging leaders, high caliber talent who can make a significant contribution. The government's identified global researchers, entrepreneurs, innovative investors, and they're the 3 groups that we typically work with, but also athletes and creative talent. And we have at Henley and Partners assisted a number of people in that final category. It is an invitation-only program. You must be invited to apply for the National Innovation Visa. The way you do that is you prepare and submit what's called an expression of interest. There's no cost for that. That goes to the government. The Department of Home Affairs will look at your expression of interest. If they feel that they want, that they're interested in your application and they want the skills that you've got to come to Australia, they'll send you an invitation to apply. They look at these expressions of interest in these 4 priority categories. Priority 1, exceptional candidates in any category, any sector, industry sector, who are global experts and recipients of top-of-field awards. Priority 2 is candidates from any industry sector nominated by an Australian, Commonwealth, state or territory government agency. And the government have said they expect probably 50% or more of applicants to fall into that priority category 2. They understand the priority category 1, top-of-field awards, that's never going to deliver large numbers of clients. But priority 2, nominated by our state and territory governments, that is where a large number of applicants are expected to come from. Priority 3 then is candidates in these tier 1 sectors: critical technologies, health industries, renewables, and low emission technologies. And then category 4, ag food, ag tech, defence capability, space, education, financial services and fintech, infrastructure and transport, and resources. Now, how do you qualify? Well, you know, I've said this a couple of times, you really need to be at the top of your field. The government is looking for, if you are recipient of a top-of-field award, that needs to be combined with outstanding career achievements over a lengthy career. They'll look at recipients of national research grants, the recipient of national level research grants for the highest quality research in Australia. That's if you're in the academic field. And then the government will also consider holders of PhDs with a high academic influence or thought leadership in their field. Once you get down to priority categories 2, 3 and 4, I mentioned a number of industry sectors that government is targeting. I'm not going to run through all of those. Critical technologies, there's some of the specializations in critical technologies. Likewise with renewables and low emissions technologies, health industries. And you can see what the government is doing here. They're identifying innovative parts of those sectors and looking for candidates from around the world who are experts in that field. So you need to be working in that field. You need to be an academic in that field. Perhaps you're an investor in one of these fields and you've got a track record of angel investing in industries that are working in these fields. They're the sorts of people that the Australian government is trying to attract under the National Innovation Visa. When you get down to priority category 4, you're looking at the tier 2 sectors: ag food and ag tech, education, defence capabilities, space, financial services, fintech, infrastructure and transport, and resources. I thought this might be useful. All of our state and territory governments have got their own list of selection criteria or requirements, if you like, for the National Innovation Visa. This is New South Wales, our most populous state. This is where Sydney is located. This is what they say about the types of people they are seeking for the National Innovation Visa. So they have identified academics and researchers. They're looking for you to prove what you've been doing and how that would be of benefit to New South Wales. Likewise with entrepreneurs, if you have a proven history of founding, leading, or contributing to successful, innovative businesses, you're the sort of person that the New South Wales government is looking for. Innovative investors, angel investors, venture capital investors, again with a proven track record of success. New South Wales also is looking for sports professionals and creative talent. Actually, at Henley's, we've been quite successful with a couple of creative talent applicants out of the United States, producers, directors, screenwriters, and so on, who have a national or an international reputation. Okay, I realise I'm moving through this quite quickly, but we do have a lot to cover. So how does your journey happen with Henley and Partners if you think you would qualify for Australia's National Innovation Visa? What you do is you contact one of us. We will do an initial NIV assessment. You send us your CV, perhaps your LinkedIn profile, any other information you can send us. We'll look at what you send us. We'll tell you whether we think you will qualify. If we don't think you'll qualify, we'll tell you that, and you won't have wasted any time or any money. If we do think you will qualify and you want to go ahead with an application, we onboard you with Henley & Partners. Then we work here in Melbourne with a group of professional resume writers who will rewrite your resume, your CV if you like, and prepare a supporting statement. These are the two critical parts of the NIV application. So they'll work with you to do that. We then help you to identify an appropriate nominator, because you need to be nominated for this visa. That might be a state and territory government. That would be the best outcome. If you're an academic, for example, you might have a contact in your field in one of the universities in Australia. That might be a good contact and a good nominator for you. But we'll help you to find a nominator for your application. We then prepare your expression of interest and submit it to the Australian government. As soon as you receive an invitation to apply for the program, of course, we help you prepare and submit the visa application. We'll help you with the health and character process as you go through that, and then finally the approval of your visa. How long does it take? At the moment, you can expect 6 to 9 months while the government looks at your NIV, unless, of course, you're in priority category 1 and you're the recipient of a top field award. That might come through a bit more quickly, but typically 6 months, and then the application another 6 months for the government to have a look. So we're typically telling our clients, expect this process to take around about 12 months. Why should you use Henley & Partners? Well, because we dedicate a relationship manager to manage the entire process for you. They make sure that your application is properly prepared so that it has the greatest chance of success once we lodge it with the government. I mentioned partnering with the people here in Australia to rewrite your resume and your statement. They're the most important parts of your application. Also, helping you find a nominator. A lot of other companies won't do that. They'll say to you, there's a nomination requirement for the NIV, and tell us once you've found somebody. At Henley's, we don't do that. We'll help you find somebody. We've got a vast network of people we can plug into, and we also have very good contacts with the state governments. So we'll help you find a nominator for your application. And then still very pleased to say that the success rate for Henley & Partners for the previous Global Talent Visa and the current National Innovation Visa is 100%. So we've not had any of our applicants refused once we've gone forward with that application. Okay, that was a really quick overview of Australia's National Innovation Visa, and now we're going to move on to New Zealand, which is a wonderful country just to the east of Australia, we like to say, and they have a tremendous program, which we're going to talk about now. So New Zealand, it's world-renowned for its natural environment, the clean and green reputation that New Zealand is very proud of. They're one of the highest levels of renewable energy in the world. The Human Development Index, very similar to the UK, Canada, and Europe. It's a country the size of the UK, but with, less than a tenth of the population, just 5.2 million. So, not overpopulated, very similar to Ireland. Smaller population than Singapore, Hong Kong, and so on. But as I said, a country basically the same size as the UK. Wonderful photo there from the South Island. New Zealand has a reputation for safety and stability. So their high level of democracy ranked second on the Global Democracy Index back in 2023. Actually, I think, Tim, ranked higher than that in 2024. I should update the slide. I think they were actually ranked second. Maybe second again in 2024, I think. Definitely one of the safest countries in the world, again, on the Global Peace Index. You can see these other rankings here that first for economic competitiveness in 2019. And then that final point, this comes up every time we do one of these seminars. New Zealand is about as far away as you can get from potential conflict zones, global hotspots at the moment. We do get a lot of clients who point that out to us. They are very, very happy to travel to New Zealand. It takes a long time, but once they get there, they realise why they've made the trip. A little bit of information on this slide about the New Zealand economy and business. I'm not going to read all of those out. You can read those yourself. Point number 3, I guess, ranked number 1 for ease of doing business in 2020. Very, very low levels of corruption. And then I'm sure Tim will probably cover a little bit of this in his spiel a little bit later on. A very beneficial tax system in New Zealand. No gift tax, no estate tax, no wealth tax, no capital gains tax in New Zealand. And I think some changes coming for taxation for new residents in New Zealand. Maybe Tim will cover those as well when we get to his part of the presentation. Okay, I think that's Wellington. Is that right, Tim?
That is Wellington.
Another great photo. Always very windy though in Wellington. All right, the residence program in New Zealand, the Active Investor Plus program. When you have residents of New Zealand, you can live, work and study there. There are some real estate options available for you. We'll talk about those a little bit later. The way the investor visa works, we'll go into a bit more detail, but essentially you get a resident visa for either 3 or 5 years, depending on which program you choose. And at the end of that, provided you've met the minimum residence requirement and you have your investments remained in place, you can turn that resident visa into a permanent resident visa. And the key thing about New Zealand permanent residence is you hold it for life. It never expires. You never have to do anything else. You know, unlike many other countries, it's quite unique in New Zealand. You have permanent residence and you have it forever. And it is a pathway to citizenship. You do need to, live in New Zealand, physically live in New Zealand for 5 years, essentially 8 months of each year for 5 years. But if you choose to do that, after 5 years, you're eligible for citizenship and a New Zealand passport. And the New Zealand passport is a terrific passport, ranked number 4 currently on the Henley Passport Index. Okay, now we're getting into the details of the visa. So the Active Investor Plus program, it's actually been around for a little while, but there were some key changes in April of this year. And those changes essentially made the program simpler for investors in a couple of ways. They simplified the whole investor program. They reduced the number of days of residence that you need in New Zealand over the period of the investment, and they removed the English language requirement. And the government there is really keen for these programs to succeed, and they are succeeding. And there are some other changes coming which will make them even more attractive. I think I'm going to leave that for Tim to cover. Essentially, the two categories are the growth category and the balance category. The growth category focuses on managed funds and direct investment. Approved by New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. I think that's called Invest New Zealand now. It is a 3-year resident program and a $5 million New Zealand investment. Now, 5 million New Zealand, that's about 3 million US at the moment, roughly. The balance category, a wider range of investments, some less risky investments, but it does require an investment of 10 million New Zealand dollars, and the period is 5 years. So 10 million, around about 6 million US, and it's a 5-year period. For the growth category, the 3-year program, the minimum stay is 21 days. For the balance category, the 10 million program, it's a 5-year period, minimum 105 days over that 5 years. Okay, again, you're journeying with Henley and Partners. We do an initial assessment. We look at your source of funds. We just want to make sure there aren't going to be any hiccups with your application. We then talk to you a little bit about the investment. Typically, we bring someone like Tim along to that conversation. You can have a chat. If you're happy to go ahead, we then onboard you with Henley's. We prepare your application. The New Zealand government is very quick, actually. They'll turn around these applications in about 8 to 10 weeks, perhaps sometimes a little bit quicker than that. What they'll do then is give you approval in principle. I'll say, we've looked at your application, we're happy with what you're going to do. Here's your approval in principle. Now you have a 6-month period in which to transfer your funds and into New Zealand and make your investment. Once you've done that, as soon as your funds hit New Zealand, you're granted a resident visa, and either your 3-year or your 5-year period starts then. The New Zealand government does like you to make a trip to New Zealand in the first 12 months. That's everybody in the application, kids included, but there's no minimum amount you need to stay on that first trip. It's kind of like activating the visa, if you like. Once you get to the conclusion of the investment period, as I mentioned before, you can turn the resident visa into a permanent resident visa, and then you're on the pathway to citizenship. All right, I feel like I've been speed talking a little bit there, so I hope I haven't gone too quickly, and if you've got questions, we can cover those at the end. But I'm now going to hand over to my buddy Tim at Forsyth Bar, just to give you a bit more detail about the investment and how it works. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I might just share my side if that's all right. I've just moved a few things around after your conversation, but it's very good to follow Australia, I think. Our visa separately is for everyone, not just those with extraordinary talent. So very much an attraction visa, and one that is looking to attract people with talent, skills, networks, but also looking for either a plan B insurance policy or somewhere nice to retire in their later years. So I represent Forsyth Bar. We're the largest private wealth advisory firm in New Zealand. We have 26 offices around the country and around 600 staff. My business partner, James, and I have been helping applicants under our different visas for the last 15 years. And we take a lot of pride in both representing New Zealand, but making sure that you have a really good investment journey through our visa program. So New Zealand is a small country, like Tony mentioned. We've got 5.2, 5.3 million people, with majority of our business environment based in Auckland. We have a very low population density and plenty of room to make a life of your own. The last 4 years have been quite a tough business environment for us following COVID and the rapid rise in interest rates that the world has seen. So this visa in particular is about replacing the foreign direct investment that we've lost since COVID began. Prior to COVID, we had around 3% of our GDP per annum coming from foreign direct investment, and we're now down to 0.3. So the government has relaxed the rules, relaxed the day count requirements, and lowered the amount to make this visa as attractive as possible. So being a country on the far side of the world, we've generally remained primary sector orientated. We supply $20 billion of milk powder to China predominantly, and about $10 billion of beef to the US. And China and the US remain our two largest trading partners. We do everything possible to keep both of them happy. And I think that that increases the attractiveness of our country. We're very much the Switzerland of the South Pacific. While we are a small country, we really do have quite an amazing business environment in New Zealand. We're a country where we believe that you can have a great idea, build it in your garage and sell it to the world. And because we have really amazing trading links with Asia and with the US, typically companies will target a strong niche in New Zealand and then trade sale to one of those two regions. We have a culture here where following your university degree. Majority of Kiwis will do a big overseas experience or OE, and then return home to raise their families in their 30s, like myself. So we have quite a technologically advanced, high level of educated society here, and it's a really great place to do business, as Tony mentioned earlier. It's also a very, very good time to be buying New Zealand dollars. It's one of the cheapest times in the last 10 years. Tony mentioned before that it's about $3 million US equivalent at the moment, but it's really about 2.7. So it's got about 10% cheaper in the last year or so. And we do expect that New Zealand dollar is reaching one of its lows here. So a good time to be looking at moving some currency to New Zealand. Right, so the active investor visa. The active investor visa, the 3-year or the 5-year categories, are really differentiated by the level of risk that you need to take. The 3-year growth category is a private market investment. So the 3 years, the 21-day day count, is a trade-off between investing into our private markets, which I'll run through some funds later on. And then our balance category, which is the 10 million, is a much lower risk option. You're able to invest in our government bonds, our corporate bonds, our listed market, and we can build a diversified portfolio that's quite low risk for that journey. The trade-off is that it's a 5-year investment commitment and 105 days spent in New Zealand over those 5 years. So beginning on the balance category, typically clients who have undertaken the balance category with us so far have built a laddered government bond portfolio. We're one of 7 AAA rated government bond countries around the world. So you can have a very, very low risk journey, and clients have looked to maybe replace some of their home country bond allocation with some New Zealand bonds. So far, since April, when this new visa was announced, only 16% of applicants have undertaken the balance category, and the ones that we've seen so far are quite happy to spend, say, a 3-month period in New Zealand over that 5 years, where they will meet their day count. Separately, on the growth category, this has been by far the most popular choice, with around about 84% of people choosing the 3-year $5 million commitment. There are currently 3 and going to be 4 investment options under this visa. So private equity, which is investing in established businesses, which generally have between $10 to $100 million in annual revenue. Venture capital, which is very much investing in ideas to early stage businesses. Private credit, which is lending to those same private equity firms generally. And what has just been announced, and which we're very, very happy to talk about, is infrastructure. We have quite a large infrastructure need in New Zealand, and this visa is trying to attract foreign direct investment into our infrastructure needs. We believe that projects here will generally look to have some form of government backing, especially if they are projects of national significance. So where do we come in? Because we've been advising private clients coming through our visa programs for the last 15 years, we worked with the government to have our discretionary service, because we do not have any funds of our own. So we're an approved managed fund, so our service is an approved managed fund on the Invest New Zealand website. What that means is that at the beginning of a relationship with an applicant, we will work with them to design and develop a portfolio of growth investments. And then as soon as the applicant deploys the 5 million New Zealand dollars to a portfolio in their name, they've met all of their investment requirements for the 3 years. We then have that same amount of time, the 3-year period, to deploy their funds into our private markets. This allows us to both be their trusted person, do the due diligence on the funds in New Zealand, and help to ensure that they have a really good investment outcome. Our preferred approach so far for most visa clients has been a conservative one, ensuring access to the majority of a client's funds at the end of their 3-year period. Private credit has the highest level of liquidity, and it pays a very nice annual income. Over the 3-year period, you're able to withdraw the income, so that can help to fund your trips and travel and fund in New Zealand. So generally, we've looked to allocate about $3 million of the 5 million to private credit and across a number of funds so that you have some diversity in New Zealand. This route considerably de-risks the visa obligations as the income can be withdrawn, and we can use the remaining 2 million to spread it across the other categories within this visa. For the remaining 2 million, we have until now looked to invest across private equity in particular, but now that we have infrastructure coming to market, which was announced in the last 2 months, we think that we will be able to have a high level of liquidity for the full 5 million, be able to de-risk the client's portfolio across asset classes, and invest into assets that have a government backing in time. So with the private equity journey in particular, clients are looking at a journey where for the first 3 or 4 years, funds will be deploying their capital, and then we would expect that from year 5 to 7, clients would have most of their capital returned, as well as their private credit allocations. And then throughout the journey, we have a very good research team. They assess our whole market and what funds are here. The thing with private markets is that the best funds are not always raising. So having the 3 years to deploy is quite important in New Zealand. We have 4 really amazing private equity managers, but none of them have come to market this year, for example. So having the flexibility that we do to deploy over a 3-year period helps to de-risk your journey here. And then Tony mentioned before that we've had some very positive changes. Since April, when this visa was announced, we've had 394 applications, which has sort of caught everyone by surprise. I think that we made our visa program much easier as other countries started to shut theirs, and as geopolitical risks around the world have risen, New Zealand has become a very popular option. So the government and private sector and Kiwis generally are very, very happy with how popular our visa has become. But because our private markets are relatively shallow and conservative in comparison to Asia and the US, the government has looked to expand the growth categories, firstly into infrastructure. But we think, sort of by the end of Q1 next year, we may see other areas of our economy open for investment where we need the money. So that could be into our listed equity market underneath a certain threshold, or into commercial property development, for example. As Tony mentioned, we've also expect some migrant tax changes before the end of the year, where our government is looking at matching US citizens' tax obligations in particular, so that there's no tax disadvantage to move or to spend a large amount of time in New Zealand. And then finally, the government has announced that they will allow applicants under this visa to purchase property in New Zealand, which before now has not been allowed. the ability to purchase property by remaining a non-resident has a minimum threshold of $5 million, about 2.7 million US. So that's on top of your investment obligations for the visa. So as soon as you receive your resident visa, following your initial investment, you will be able to purchase a property over 2.7 million US dollars or 5 million Kiwi. So as you can see, this visa is very, very popular here. It is an attraction visa. We are a very long way away from everyone, and we do suffer from distance. So expect that the application process, Henley and team are very, very good at that. And for your approval to be issued within a sort of 6 to 8 week period. So doesn't take a lot of time, as long as you have the wealth, good character, good health. You're more than welcome in New Zealand. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tim. Fantastic. Lot to cover there, and I hope everybody on the call got a lot out of that. That was fantastic. So now we're going to hear a little bit about education in Australia and New Zealand. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague John Milne, who's in Dubai, to talk about that. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Tony, and thanks, Tim. And it's lovely to be on this webinar today. I'm going to talk about Australia and New Zealand. Forgive me if I jump between the two countries, because although they are very separate countries, obviously, and if you talk to anyone in Australia or New Zealand and their universities, they would say that they're very distinct from one another. There are several similarities, and just to avoid replication, I'll talk about certain aspects of the universities as if they're interchangeable, because in many respects they complement each other incredibly well. I think the one thing that they do have in common, which is at the top of the list there, is that they have now, Australia and New Zealand, both world-class universities. Not only are many of the universities in Australia and New Zealand ranked in the top 100 internationally, but many of the courses, and you can see some of them listed there at university level in both countries, such as marine biology, engineering, medicine, sports management, sports science, pharmacology, and pharmacy, are ranked in the top 10 degrees in the world. So it wasn't that long ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, where Australia and New Zealand were considered internationally as maybe a fallback plan for certain countries if you don't get into the UK or if you don't get into the US. Actually, Australia and New Zealand are now go-to countries for and some of the best degrees in the world and some of the best facilities, and certainly from a lifestyle and an employability perspective, unrivaled in many respects. So the message here, just for this slide and for the purposes of those thinking about education for their children, is that when you're considering the US or the UK or Europe or Asia, which are very popular, Australia and New Zealand are now the standout countries, not least of all because of what's happening in the US and the UK. There's a perception, real in many terms, around cost of living and value for money and return on investment, but also just in terms of safety and consideration towards well-being of students. Again, Australia and New Zealand are fabulous communities. Next slide, please, Tony. So student life, very similar in both countries, very similar to the US as well, in that almost all of the universities, whether they're located in rural settings or city settings, are very campus-based. So you've got the opportunity in Australia and New Zealand as a student to really feel as though you're part of a community, you're part of something quite special. The reality is that you're benefiting from a much larger setting and a much larger city. So again, great combination of feeling part of a community, but benefiting from a larger community. Next slide, please, Tony. So when to apply for students. So again, the great thing for international students is that in recent years, most universities, if not all universities in both of those countries, have decided that A levels, IB, SAT for American students are completely acceptable in terms of admissions. So if you're an international family, if you're an international student, whether you're in the US, whether you're in the UK, whether you're in Africa, wherever, if you're studying at a British school or an American international school or an international school, the chances are that your qualifications in high school will transfer very easily into Australian and New Zealand universities. Again, it makes the transition and the equivalency very, very seamless. And that is really important for families and for students because previously lots of universities got mired in not properly understanding what international qualifications meant. And it was very off-putting and very upsetting for many students and many families. But now there's a very clear translation of results from international quality assured, globally recognized qualifications into admissions in these universities. Again, very easy to access universities. There is still a process, and there are still barriers to entry because of the high academic standards. But typically, if you're in an international school, then the universities will welcome you and actually value very highly the qualification you're studying. Slide, please, Tony. Scholarships, it varies between Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, there are large pots of scholarship money available, particularly post-COVID, because um, there was a pot of money that was on hold in Australian universities, and so it's now become available for many, many students who want to apply based on academic standards. So no sports scholarships really in Australia, which is quite surprising because you would think with the emphasis on sport in Australia and the quality of the facilities that there would be a number of sports scholarships, but actually they don't really exist apart from in private universities such as Bond University. In New Zealand, slightly different, lots of merit-based scholarships and increasingly more and more sports scholarships, particularly in sports like rugby, as you can imagine, netball, very, very popular. So again, if you've got a student that loves sport, that's really keen to be recognised for their abilities, then probably New Zealand is your best bet on the co-curricular side. Academically, University of Sydney, for example, has 40, 100% fully funded scholarships available to international students. They give out 20 in February, another 20 in July. So again, real emphasis on encouraging the top academic talent in that country. Next slide, please, Tony. Tuition fees in Australia, again, comparing both Australia and New Zealand to international fees. The headline story is that we can't really compare it to the US because the average of a liberal arts education in the US 4 years is around about 91,000 US dollars per year at the moment. So it's very much an outlier. The real comparison is effectively between Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, where increasingly they're very comparable. It's very competitive. It used to be considered that Australia and New Zealand were very expensive. That is not the case by comparison. And in fact, where in the UK, they're increasing the cost of visas and they're about to put a tariff on international students' fees, increasing those from anywhere between 10 to 15%. And Australia and New Zealand are not looking expensive anymore. In fact, they're incredibly competitive. And the return on investment, I would say, is increasingly far better than a UK degree. Next slide, please, Tony. The degree structure, very interesting degree structure in both countries. So in terms of length of degree, identical to the UK in that it's 3 years in Australia and New Zealand, rather than 4 years, which is the US model. But in terms of content of the degrees, it's much more of a liberal art approach to how students study, so very similar to the US, as opposed to the UK, which is very focused on a particular subject. So if you choose the UK and you want to do law, that's all you'll study in your undergraduate years. Whereas in Australia, if you want to do commerce or banking or finance or actuarial studies, or if you want to do law, if you want to do medicine, you can study in liberal arts terms quite a generic degree for 3 to 4 years under the bachelor systems, and then do, like you do in America, 2 to 3 years of postgraduate where you really focus in on becoming an engineer or becoming a doctor or a vet. So it's different in different ways, but typically 3 years in Australia and New Zealand, you generalize to begin with, and then you specialize in the postgraduate years. Slide, please, Tony. Again, just by comparison, tuition fees in New Zealand, so incredibly good value. And with the addition of scholarships, not just for academics, but also for the co-curricular provision, not just sport, but also in the creative degrees as well. New Zealand is highly attractive to international students. And of course, in terms of living expenses and accommodation, far more competitive than many of the cities in Australia, where in Australia, some of the major cities like Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, you're very much comparing living costs, certainly student accommodation costs, to cities like London. So New Zealand looking very attractive indeed as a complete package in terms of. Next slide, please, Tony. In both countries, Australia and New Zealand, there are very attractive post-study work rights and pathways to residency. Again, in both countries, if you're a student and you're studying as part of your degree, there are very generous opportunities to work whilst you're studying. I think in Australia, it's something like 24 hours a week during term time and up to 40 hours per week during vacations that you can work. And then again, like New Zealand, very generous post-study work rights where you can stay on, find employment, hopefully get sponsorship, and then there are a range of opportunities for you to stay in those countries, and particularly in New Zealand at the moment, where the government seems to be encouraging students to stay on beyond their studies, either to study at postgraduate level or to consider working in the country. So again, in both of those countries, given happening in the US and the UK, where they're shortening their post-study work visas, and Canada's putting more and more pressure on postgraduate study as well, then again, Australia and New Zealand looking incredibly attractive opportunities, not just to stay on and work, but actually from a lifestyle perspective and somewhere that you would consider remaining. Next slide, please, Tony. So just very briefly, I'm pulling all the education piece together. So I was one of the founding members of Henley and Partners Education. Tess Wilkinson is the director and very much is the point person directing all of these wonderful associates from around the world, all of whom are specialists in their field. Most of them have worked in either universities or schools, so they've been working with students and families for most, if not all, of their careers. They're very vocational, so all of the work that we do for families of Henley and Partners is very tailored and bespoke and specialized to their needs, as you would imagine is their want. And so we spend a lot of time with our clients understanding the family's aspirations, the children's abilities, and we try to map that out, not just over 2 or 3 years. In many instances, we are getting families who are looking at the long term, and we're putting pathways and plans and journeys in place for these students, often in multiple countries, 7, 9 years in advance of to university. So it does take a long time to position your child in the right way and in the right country and in the right school to ensure that they have the right pathway. But with lots of planning and with lots of thinking, it's very possible to make sure that you're not guaranteeing outcomes, because you can't do that, but certainly setting them up for success in their own way. Next slide, please, Tony. So why Henley and Partners? Well, I've just described why. It's very bespoke, it's very tailored, it's run by individuals who understand education, and we're not interested in processing young people. We're interested in making sure that we find the best set for them so that they will flourish and they will find success. Next slide, please, Tony. So we offer a range of different services. I've talked a lot about school and university admissions. We also offer the Henley Academic Profiling Assessment. So this is a great opportunity for families that would like to understand their child's potential and their academic. It's an online assessment that's bespoke to Henley and Partners. I'm one of the founders of the HAPA. And so I can talk with a great deal of confidence that for young people, this is an online assessment that they take at home. It measures in a standardized way a child's or a student's abilities in English, maths, verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning, giving us a profile of their strengths and their areas for improvement. And it's a really powerful piece of data in helping us to point students in the right direction and give them the support that they need to be successful. And so if as a first step, you're interested in understanding, well, what's my child capable of? What is their potential? Where do they sit compared to their international peers? What do I need to do to support them? And the HAPA is a great way to start. And I'm very happy to talk about that in due course. Slide, please, Tony. We do the Global School and University Admissions Counselling, which I've talked about. We start with a very detailed discussion and free, no obligations conversation about your child's needs, your aspirations, and we try to map those together. And we will stay with students and their families for many years. Henley and Partners Education has been going now for, I think, 5 years. And some of the clients that we started with were now starting to look at placing their children into certain countries, into certain universities. So it's very much a journey for us, not a sprint. And we will stay with you as long as it takes. We'll provide the support that your child or your children need, because they change over time. And so it's very important that we're responsive and that we're not just trying to fit them into a bubble. Next slide, please, Tony. Thank you. And then the additional services that we can offer. So we do give advice and support to families who are potentially looking at different countries for their child's universities. And so we'll help with arranging experiential visits, summer programs. We'll do bespoke college counselling courses, particularly for the US, where it's very much about building your child's profile. And so the activities that they undertake and the experiences that they get are very important and need to be planned in advance. We do a lot of work with parents who are worried about their children and potentially identifying special educational needs. Whether you feel that your child is on the spectrum or actually they've been diagnosed, we've got the support that. We do assess children, we coach them increasingly because many young people are struggling with their confidence at the moment. So we're very good at building them up and supporting them and helping them in the best way that we can. We also specialize. So if you've got a student that's particularly good at music or sport and they want to follow a particular track, we can help them with that as well. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, I think that's the end. John, thank you very much. It was all very useful information there about education services generally from Henley's, but also studying, in Australia or New Zealand. Okay, I've just put this slide up that's got my contact details. If anybody out there wants to follow up, shoot through an email. We can certainly arrange a consultation. Just send me a a quick email if you're interested in the Australian program and you want to attach your LinkedIn profile or a resume. Happy to have a look at that. If you're interested in the New Zealand program, of course, we can talk about that as well. And happy to pass on contact details for Tim. In relation to education services, John mentioned that Tess is the point person for Henley and Partners Education. That's her contact details there. You've got her email address if you need to contact her, and she can answer any questions you have or put you in touch with one of those wonderful Henley and Partners Education service providers. Now, we do just have a couple of questions. Tim, these are both for you, actually. The first question is, can I expect any return on my investment over a 3-year period in the growth category? So
yes,
how would you?
Yes, absolutely. This is definitely not a donation, and we expect that you'll receive a very good return over the 3-year period. It depends on how you would like your portfolio to be structured. So with private credit, at the moment, the funds that we work with are providing a yield of about 4 to 5% over our official cash rate. We expect that to be maintained across the cycle. Private equity in New Zealand generally provides a 15% annual return over the life of the fund. And venture capital is very much an outcomes-based investment. So generally, the sector provides a 20 to 25% annual return over the life of the fund. And then infrastructure is a very new category. It's a new category for New Zealand. We don't have a lot of experience in it, but I would expect that due to the global asset class performance, it should be a steady and stable income return plus capital growth. So watch that space.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question also for you. May New Zealand applicants select their preferred investment partner to design their
Yes,
portfolio?
absolutely. This visa is trying to enable people to have a very active role in New Zealand, from meeting founders, meeting fund managers, to making their own investments if that's what they choose. They can have as much of an active role in building out their investment portfolio as they would like. We have quite a small market here, as we mentioned earlier. So generally for clients who would like a more active role, we've introduced them to fund managers or help them take smaller allocations in funds. And then that brings them access to the founders within each fund, their events. This visa the growth category visa is a very good way to network and meet friends. You can spread your investment as widely as you would like, and that gives you access to much of our economy here.
Great, thank you for that. We have a question here about residence extending to members of the family, and in particular a child who is an adult child with some disability over the age, so the child is 30 actually. That's probably a question for us here at Henley's. Yeah, that's a bit complicated. If you would like to send me an email, I've put my email address up there on the screen about that. I don't have your name, so if you would like to send that through to me in an email, I'll get back to you with a more detailed answer on that. Generally speaking, for New Zealand, adult children, if they're fully dependent, up to the age of 24, so they can be included before they've got their 25th birthday. If you have a child with some disability that's fully dependent on you, we can certainly have a conversation about that. The next question is from a person who is 53, veterinary surgeon with a master's from Murdoch University in Western Australia, fantastic university. Am I eligible for the special PR program? I presume you're talking about the Australian National Innovation Visa. If you are, then the answer is potentially yes. You're under the age of 55, so the government would consider an expression of interest from you. You would need to be, an exceptional person in your field. and you would need to demonstrate, how what you've done has been innovative in some way and how that would benefit the Australian community. So again, shoot me an email, attach any information you've got, and we can provide you a more detailed answer. All right. I don't think we have any other questions. So we might leave it at that. That's a little bit over an hour. I'd like to thank both Tim and John for joining me tonight. Very, very useful information provided by both of those gentlemen. I hope everybody on the webinar got some useful information out of that. I'm sure you did. As I've said now 3 or 4 times, if you've got further questions or you want to arrange a follow-up call, if you want to be put in touch with anybody, please just send me an email. My email address is on the screen now, and I'll answer you as quickly as I can. So once again, thank you everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Henley and Partners Global Webinar event. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.